was the kind of night where the darkness feels heavy. The kind of dark where you can't see your hand in front of your face. Where the only thing you hear is the faint rustle of leaves, or maybe your own heartbeat. I lay there, wide awake, listening to the forest breathe. And that's when I heard it. A whisper right outside the tent. It said my name.
John.
Let me start at the beginning. I was alone, on purpose. I'd hiked deep into the national forest, farther than I'd ever gone solo before. 10 miles off trail, past the last marked campsite. No cell signal, no other hikers. Just me, the trees, and the quiet I'd been craving. You wanted to be alone. This is what you came out here for. The day had been perfect. The kind of blue sky that feels endless. The trail had been tough, steep in places, overgrown in others, but worth it. I'd found a little clearing near a creek. The ground was soft with pine needles. It felt like no one had camped there in years, maybe ever. By the time I set up camp and ate, dusk was settling in. The forest at twilight is something else. The way the trees go black against that last bit of light, the sudden coolness in the air, the way every sound seems sharper. I remember feeling small, not in a bad way, just small. After the sun went down, I sat by my fire until it burned down to embers. No reason to stay up late, no phone, no distractions, just the stars, the breeze in the trees and the crackle of the coals. When I finally crawled into my tent, I felt that good kind of tired, the kind where your body aches in the right ways, from effort, not stress. The night was so quiet, I could hear the creek 100 yards off. The cool air smelled like damp earth and pine sap. I remember thinking, this is peace. I shifted around, trying to get comfortable. My body was settling, the kind of slow sinking you feel right before sleep takes over. My mind started to drift. That's when I thought I heard something. A soft sound, too soft to make out. I held still, listening harder, and then I realized. It was my name.
John.
A whisper, so quiet I almost thought I imagined it. That stillness started to feel wrong. The mind can play tricks on you sometimes when you're out in complete silence. It's nothing. I tried to let it go, tried to convince myself I was hearing the wind or maybe a distant animal, but I couldn't shake it. The voice had sounded close, too close. I shut my eyes. You're tired. You're hearing things. I pulled my sleeping bag tighter, tried to focus on my breathing, tried to let the sound of the forest lull me back to sleep. But the forest wasn't making any sound anymore. No wind, no nightbirds, just silence, and the blood pounding in my ears. And then I heard it again. The whisper.
John.
Closer this time. Soft but clear. And then, the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Soft, slow, deliberate, circling the tent. I froze. The steps sounded wrong. Not quite human, not quite animal. I couldn't tell if it was 2 feet or 4. The rhythm of it was strange, uneven, like it didn't belong out there. And then, I heard it step on a branch. A clean, sharp snap. That's when it hit me. I had nothing to defend myself with. No knife within reach, no bear spray, nothing. Just a thin layer of nylon between me and whatever was out there. And then the sound changed. A scratching, fingernails, or something like fingernails, dragging down the side of the tent. First lightly, then harder, slow and steady, like whoever was out there wanted me to hear it. The tent fabric shivered with the vibration. I could feel the cold seeping through the seams. The faint, bitter smell of ashes from the dead fire drifted in on the breeze. I couldn't take it anymore. If I stay quiet, maybe it'll go away. But if I don't look, I'll never know. My hands shook as I reached for the zipper. Slowly, quietly, I unzipped the tent door just enough to shine my flashlight through the crack. Please, let there be nothing there. The beam cut through the black, swinging wildly as my hand trembled. And then, just at the edge of the clearing, I saw it. Something pale, tall, thin. It moved, fast, slipping behind a tree. Too fast, too tall. The whispering stopped, and the night, the whole forest, went completely, unnaturally still. The air felt thick, like before a thunderstorm, when you can feel the electricity waiting to break. I backed into the tent, zipped it shut, and sat there, listening. I didn't sleep. Every creak of a branch, every sigh of wind, I thought it was coming back. But nothing happened. When the first light crept through the trees, I stepped out, and the clearing was empty. No footprints, no broken branches, no sign anything, or anyone, had been there at all. Just the still, quiet forest, as if the night before had been a dream. I packed up fast, hiked out without stopping. The whole way, I felt watched. And as I reached the trailhead, just as I let myself think I was safe, I heard it.
John.
Soft from the trees. A final whisper carried on the breeze. I let out a shaky breath. The mind can play tricks on you sometimes when you're out in complete silence. It was nothing. It wasn't until I got home that I let myself breathe easy. I threw my pack down, took a shower, tried to forget about it. I went to bed and slept like I hadn't in days. The next morning, I started unpacking my gear. After I put everything else away, I started to put away the tent. I was starting to slide it onto the shelf in the garage when something inside the tent pricked me. It didn't draw blood, but it definitely caused a sharp pinch. I opened up the tent to inspect it, and that's when I saw it. A thin, clean tear in the fabric, right where I'd heard the scratching, and caught in the edge of the tear was what looked like a fingernail. Not from any animal, and not from any human. I checked myself one more time, just to be sure. No blood, no mark. I don't go camping alone anymore. We froze the moment we saw it, a flicker of light weaving through the trees. A lantern, small, steady, bobbing between the trunks like it was being carried by someone. But we were the only group camping out here, or so we thought. It was supposed to be a fun weekend. Me, my brother Jason, and our friends Matt and Chris. We'd camped this spot a few times before, deep in the woods, so far out, you had to park miles away and hike in. No cell signal, no people, just silence and stars. That's what we liked about it. The first night was perfect. The fire crackled, throwing sparks up into the dark. The air smelled of pine and smoke. The sky was so clear, the stars felt close enough to touch. We sat around, passing beers, telling the same ghost stories we'd shared since high school. I remember thinking how good it felt to be out here. No stress, no noise, just us. And then we noticed it. At first I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, a pale light bobbing between the trees. A lantern, maybe 100 yards out, moving slow, steady, purposeful. Not a flashlight beam. This was warmer, yellowish, old-fashioned. "Do you see that?" Jason asked, his voice low. We all stared. It was too far off any trail, and too late for anyone to be out for a walk. Matt tried to play it cool. "Probably a ranger," he said, but he didn't sound convinced. Chris frowned. "No ranger would be out here this late, and with a lantern. Who even uses those anymore?" I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. The light kept coming, weaving between the trees like it knew where it was going. Jason raised his beer. Should invite them over for a drink. No one laughed. We just stood there listening. The crackle of the fire, the soft hiss of wind in the trees, and beyond that, nothing. Just that light, flickering, motionless now, like it had stopped. Like whoever carried it was standing still, watching. Maybe they're lost," Matt said. But even he didn't believe it. Chris shifted, glancing at the dark beyond the clearing. "Then why aren't they calling out, if they need help?" The lantern stayed where it was, hovering between the trees. The glow seemed unnatural now, too still, too patient. I felt my mouth go dry. My skin prickled with that deep, gut-level sense that something was off. Minutes dragged by. The fire popped, sending up a burst of sparks that drifted out and died in the dark. The lantern stayed put, like it was waiting. For us? For something? Jason lowered his beer. Okay, this is weird. And then, finally, it moved. The lantern started drifting toward us. Slow, steady. The glow grew brighter, weaving between the trees like it knew the way. I couldn't see who carried it, couldn't hear footsteps. No voice, no rustle of brush, just the light gliding forward. Jason tensed beside me. What the hell? Then, without warning, it stopped again. Just inside the tree line this time. The glow pooled on the forest floor, lighting up the undergrowth in sickly yellow. We stood frozen, hearts pounding, waiting for something, anything, to break the silence. The lantern shifted. The glow turned, as if whoever carried it had changed their mind, and it started moving away, deeper into the woods. The light fading, swallowed by the trees. That's when curiosity, or maybe stupidity, got the better of us. Just like something out of a bad horror movie, we grabbed our own lanterns and followed. The deeper we went, the stranger the forest seemed. The ground grew soft and mossy, muffling our steps. The trees leaned in, branches clawing at our jackets. The air turned cold, heavy. I could feel the tension in my chest, that tight electric feeling of being watched. The light stayed ahead of us, always just out of reach. Sometimes it would pause, as if waiting, then drift forward again. And we kept going, deeper, farther than we should have. Finally, we stopped. The lantern had vanished, and we realized where we were. Our own campsite, only it wasn't how we'd left it. The fire was out, just a circle of cold ash. Our gear was scattered, as if someone had been rummaging through it. The cooler was tipped over, food spilled onto the ground. And in the ash, circling where we'd been sitting, were footprints, not ours. Jason's voice was tight, low. We need to leave. Now. We turned to look for the trail, but it was like the forest had shifted, swallowed it whole. The trees felt too close, too unfamiliar. And then we saw it again, the lantern, flickering between the trees, closer than before. We didn't talk. We ran. I could hear my own breathing, ragged and loud. Branches tore at my face and arms. The lantern surged toward us, fast, impossibly fast. In seconds it was on us, and as it passed, we saw it clearly. No one carried it. The lantern floated, steady and smooth, casting its pale light as it swayed gently in the air, as if held by invisible hands. And then it was gone, swallowed by the dark. We didn't stop until the first light of dawn. The forest seemed to loosen its grip as the sun came up. We found the trail. We hiked out as fast as we could, silent, shaken. None of us said it out loud, but we knew we weren't coming back. A few weeks later, Jason found something online. An old newspaper clipping. Decades ago, a hermit lived out there. People said he'd wander the forest at night with a lantern. One night, he just disappeared. No trace, no body. The man had been so friendly the night before, but by morning, it was as if he'd never existed. No tracks, no sign of his presence. Just the cold, unsettling feeling that we'd shared our fire with something that didn't belong. Or even worse, didn't exist. It started out like one of those trips that feels charmed from the start. The three of us, me, my brother Eric, and our friend Luis, had been looking for quiet, for the kind of wilderness where the world feels untouched. We found it at a lake deep in the woods, hours from the nearest town. The spot was perfect. A narrow stretch of shore, ringed with pines, the water black and still beneath a sky already thick with stars. We pitched camp, cooked dinner, and settled in by the fire. The night was clear and cool. The only sounds were the crackle of burning wood and the soft whisper of water lapping against the shore. For a long time, we just sat there, watching the flames, letting the peace of the place sink in. But as the fire burned lower, that peace began to feel thin. The silence grew too deep, the dark beyond our firelight too heavy. It was the kind of quiet that makes you listen hard, that makes your skin prickle as if you're being watched. Then came the sound, the slow, steady crunch of footsteps on dry leaves. Not an animal, not some small scurry. Someone walking, deliberate, close. A figure stepped into the edge of the firelight. A man. He looked like any hiker at first glance, mid-30s maybe, with dark hair under a faded cap. He wore a red quilted vest over a flannel shirt, jeans tucked into worn boots, and carried a small canvas pack slung over one shoulder. His face was pale in the flickering glow, his smile polite but somehow distant, as if it didn't quite belong. "Mind if I sit a while?" he asked, his voice low and even, but with a hollow tone, as if it came from far away or from someone remembering how to sound human. We hesitated, just long enough to feel that hesitation, but then Eric nodded. "Sure," he said. The man settled onto a log, set his pack down neatly at his feet, and pulled out a strip of jerky, offering some to us. We shook our heads, and he began chewing slowly, watching the flames. "Names," he started to say, but before he could finish, a loud crack came from deeper in the woods. We all turned instinctively toward the sound, hearts racing a little, scanning the shadows. But there was nothing. When we looked back at him, he hadn't moved, hadn't even seemed to notice. He started talking after that, at first about the trails and the lake, but soon his stories took a darker turn. He told of a hiker caught in an early storm, how the man had gotten turned around after dark, how the cold had set in quick, how he'd tried to find shelter but kept circling back to the same spot. He described it like he'd seen it. The rising panic, the way the trees all began to look the same, the feeling of the cold settling into your bones. "He had a red vest," the man said, glancing down at his own. "Just like this one. They say he thought he saw a light, maybe a campfire, but it was too late. The cold had already got him." There was a quiet after that, as if the woods were holding their breath, and it was then I realized I could see mine, a thin white cloud in the freezing air. The temperature had dropped sharply. Eric leaned closer to the fire. Luis tossed on another log. I saw him glance at our guest, maybe to see if he was feeling the cold too. But the man sat still, his hands folded, his face calm. Not a shiver, not a breath of frost from his mouth. We offered him a blanket, some coffee, anything. But he only shook his head. "I don't feel it much," he said quietly. At last, after what felt like hours, he rose. "Thanks for the company, but I like to keep moving." And with that, he stepped beyond the circle of firelight. No sound of footsteps this time, just gone. I lay awake for a long time listening, expecting to hear him come back, hoping I wouldn't. Morning came gray and bitterly cold. I stepped out of my tent, expecting something. Maybe a trail of footprints, maybe a sign of where he'd gone. But the ground where he'd sat was undisturbed. No scuff marks, no tracks leading into the trees. The blanket we'd offered was still folded, just as we'd left it. For a moment, I thought that was it. No sign at all. But then I saw it. Where he'd been sitting, the grass was rimed with frost, a perfect outline, the only frost anywhere around, as if the cold had come from him. We packed quickly, none of us saying much. There didn't seem to be anything to say. It wasn't until we stopped for gas, miles down the road, that we spoke of it. The clerk behind the counter overheard and looked up sharply. "You saw him?" he asked. We hesitated. "I guess. A hiker, red vest, dark hair." The clerk nodded slowly. Used to be a regular out here, part of one of the camping groups that came through a lot. Real nice guy. Got caught in a freeze one fall years back. They found him after the thaw. He gestured toward a faded corkboard by the door, cluttered with maps and flyers. There, yellowed and curling at the edges, was a photo. 3 men in front of a trailhead sign, grinning at the camera. And there he was. Same red vest, same cap, same face. The clerk gave us a strange look when we didn't say anything. But what could we say? We just paid for our gas and drove on, the weight of that photo heavy in the silence. And all I could think, over and over, was how we never did get his name.